Workergenix. At Workergenix, we help high-performing founders and operators reclaim time and focus by pairing them with ultimate executive assistants who reduce operational drag and increase leadership bandwidth. These live sessions are one way we support the broader business community with honest, peer-level conversations about what actually works when companies are growing and time is tight. Today's conversation is focused on delegation that drives sales. Founders know that sales drives growth, but too often revenue opportunities stall because leadership time is buried in follow-ups, scheduling, and day-to-day execution. When everything runs through you, selling becomes reactive instead of intentional. So today, you'll hear real-world perspectives, practical trade-offs, and honest insight from operators who've helped founders remove themselves as the bottleneck without breaking momentum. And a quick note before we begin, today's session will also be featured on our podcast, Scale Smart, Grow Fast. So if something resonates with you, you'll be able to revisit the conversation later wherever you get your podcasts. So today, let's dive in and start by meeting our panelists. Eric, we'll go ahead and start with you. Feel free to introduce yourself and let everyone know where you're coming from and what your business is.
Thanks very much, Harley. So my name is Eric Sambaluk. I'm the owner and founder of Sambaluk Consulting. It's a business strategy firm, and we help companies with everything from initiatives to projects to market entry. I'm also the Chief Growth and Strategy Officer for Nomad Cyber Concepts, which is an AI governance firm.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric, for joining us. Jennifer.
Good afternoon, everyone. Jennifer White with the MJW Group. We specialize in enhancing operational efficiency and leadership capabilities, delivering time and cost savings for organizations.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us today. And JB.
Hi, everybody. My name is JB Herrera, and I am the founder and CEO of Synergy AI and Insight Driven Business. We specialize in designing AI ecosystems that are values-based. They're scalable, human-first, helping organizations move beyond shiny tools to disciplined execution. We're here in Northern California and proud to work with a whole series of small to medium-sized businesses.
Awesome. Thank you, JB. And last but certainly not least, Wendy.
Wendy Y. Hi, everyone. I'm Wendy Y. Bailey. I'm a fractional COO for coaches, speakers, and trainers, millionaire coaches, speakers, and trainers. And I partner with them to look at their operational infrastructure and get rid of the bottlenecks that they create. As a former coach, I'm also a leadership coach. So I coach the founder to be sure the founder understands what it takes to grow, scale, and drive revenue in a way that represents that growth for them. I'm outside of Atlanta, Georgia. And, the big thing I can say is companies need operational support in order to drive revenue.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us, all of you guys, for being here today. We'll jump right in with the first question. This is just an open question to the panel, so feel free to jump in if you want to address it first. So the question is, when you hear delegation that drives sales, what's the biggest misconception you see founders make about that delegation as it relates to sales and revenue?
I'll jump in here first. I think that a lot of times founders look at sales as what's necessary, and so they throw bodies at it rather than making sure they have the right people performing the right kinds of tasks and activities. So throwing bodies at it is not the answer to drive sales revenue or sales or revenue. It really is about making sure that you understand what you're doing, how the organization works, and what's going to drive the sales, and then make sure you hire the right people. That's kind of part of another question, but I think you got to hire the right people and not just throw bodies at it.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Wendy Y. I mean, really, from my perspective, the biggest misconception is that delegation is really about offloading work, right, and becoming more efficient. I think really delegation that drives sales is about protecting the judgment that you have in your company, right? Founders don't lose revenue because they delegate too much. They lose revenue because they delegate without clarity about what decisions they must stay human about and the direction that they're going, which activities should never require their attention in the first place. And if they do that, then they can hire the right people. and implement processes, and then delegation works.
I think those are both good points. I think another thing that's important to keep in mind is people think about delegation, and when they do think about delegation, they think of efficiency. They really should be thinking about effectiveness. When a CEO or someone else in the C-suite or a VP delegates some work, it's not because they're inefficient at it. It's because they're most effective at making high-level decisions. Somebody else to whom the task is delegated will be most effective at managing those decisions, right? So making sure that the ball is in the right person's strike zone is, I think, what delegation should be about. Like JB was saying, like Wendy Y was saying, it's not just about, oh, cool, I don't have to do this task anymore. I didn't like this, or I don't have to do this task anymore. This is going to take a long time. It's about every hour is spoken for, especially true of founders and entrepreneurs. So you want to make certain that you're being as effective as possible with every minute, every hour that you have.
I think
And
that
I agree with Eric's points as well. Sometimes, founders or C-suite may think of delegation as, trying to get rid of something or delegating that task rather. I think a misconception is thinking that sales is a task. It's a driver of growing revenue, as Wendy Y stated and Eric has stated already. And I think a big misconception is thinking delegation happens after the company is successful, when in reality, it should be driven all along the growth journey, and having that buy in of everyone involved in that process is what really grows the company.
yeah, I also think that when you think about you're a founder, you're a C-suite manager, you've got to delegate in a way that gives the whole program, the whole task, the whole activity with all of the details for that person to be successful in executing on what you delegate to them. So I think that's part of it too. As part of that, I think you also have to recognize um, giving the whole information, like all of the information. They need to understand the role or the situation that that activity has in the overall scheme. You have the vision, but having the vision isn't enough when you delegate. You need to delegate that vision as well.
Wendy, why that's really awesome. It's a great point. And it makes me think of a metaphor like being an air traffic control system, right? Sales doesn't fail because you have too many planes in the air. It fails when one person is trying to fly, direct, refuel, clear the landing zone, unload the packages, everything, right? The founder, the CEO, the leader is really air traffic control, not the pilot of every plane, not getting into the detail of everything. Now, clearly, when you're starting a business, the CEO, the leader at that point, you're the only person that really can sell what is your passion. This is what you're about. This is what you stand for. And that's, many CEOs continue to have that role over the long haul. There's nothing wrong with that. But we can't do it on our own. And sometimes we have this thing in our heads that says, I'm the only person that can do that. No, 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 no. You have to be the air traffic controller here and set that direction, know where everything is at, and give people and empower them with the right tools, the right processes, the right steps, the right things that they need to have to be the best that they can be.
And that kind of points back to what Wendy Y was saying earlier about hiring the right people, right?
Yeah.
It's easy to say, well, you're overwhelmed, you're not managing these tasks that you should be. You should go ahead and delegate it. But before you delegate it, you want to make certain that the person you're delegating it to has the skill set, and to her point also the context to be effective in making those decisions or doing that work. And it's not an easy thing to do, but it is really critical.
Yeah, there's a difference between delegation and abdication, right?
Yeah. 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 I love
I'm
that
sorry, Wendy,
analogy. Yeah, I think too that when you delegate in a way that's effective, that means you've got to hire the right person, but you ask questions as you're looking to hire them to know what kind of fit they're going to be. You look at experience, you look at tools and systems they know. You look at these days, you want to know what kind of AI they understand as well, and how they use it. Not so much what, but how they use AI in what they do every day to make their work easier. I also think you want to look at their expertise and their education, not from the standpoint of what school did they go to, but what did they learn and how do they apply it in their day-to-day work.
Mhm.
Awesome. These are some great insights. Starting off strong here. I love it. Wendy Y, I want to go to you for this next question first. From an operational leadership perspective, where do you most often see delegation break down for founders who are trying to protect their selling time?
It goes back to what I said before. It's throwing bodies at it rather than the right bodies. It's making sure that in the breakdown happens when they throw bodies at it rather than making sure they have the right person for the job and they've effectively delegated the whole activity to them and supported them in some degree of autonomy, so that
Mhm.
the founder is not still stuck in the middle of trying to make things happen around that. That comes into play in a big way as it relates to sales, because a lot of people that you delegate to these days as a founder are people who are helping you with your lead generation or your lead management. And when you look at those two areas in particular, you've got to make sure that person understands that it's driving sales, how it's driving sales, and what their contribution is to that. So, right person, right job, right education, right understanding of how it affects the overall business, and so much more.
Awesome. Thank you. JB, I want to go to you next. You work at the
Mhm.
intersection of systems, judgment, and technology. How should
Mhm.
founders think about delegation when tools and AI are introduced without
Yeah.
losing clarity or that human decision making in the sales process?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's the core of what I've stood for, going back to my first jobs coming out of Apple back in the 80s. Yes, I'm an old guy. Founders need to stop asking, what can AI do, or what can these tools do, and start asking, what judgment must remain human? Tools and AI are phenomenal at preparation, at pattern recognition, at follow through. But sales still lives in human judgment, reading context, sensing hesitation, um, knowing when not to delegate, when to delegate, what kinds of things need to be done that are supporting that particular prospect at that moment in time. Delegation doesn't work to tools like AI. And I know AI very, very well. This is, while everybody's doing this now, my first foray into AI was in 1993. So when you start thinking specifically about what the tool is designed for, it infers based on what the kinds of input we give it, but it doesn't have the judgment that comes from experience. And that experience comes from being around people and having your own values, your own decision making capabilities. Those are things that an AI can be given rules about, but that's not judgment. So, technically, the danger isn't in utilizing automation. It's that term again, abdication, right? When founders let their tools make their decisions, they haven't consciously designed anything, then clarity erodes. And when clarity erodes, your sales go down. You start to drift if you really think about it. So you have an ICP, right? An ideal client profile. And and let's just say hypothetically there are 5 particular points for that ideal client profile. And then you have a salesperson comes in and they say, you know what, we got this opportunity, it's really awesome, but they only have 4 points, not 5. Well, okay, it's 4 or 5. It's okay. We're going to go for it. And so you close the deal. So now your ideal client profile is here, and now you've started to have somebody that's not your ideal client profile. And the next person comes in and they have something, they only have 3 out of the 5. So now you're over here. And pretty soon your ideal client profile here and your sales are over here on this side. And that creates all kinds of problems. because your systems are designed for that ideal client profile. They're not designed for all of these other people that are over on great people, good businesses, valuable all, but you've started to drift away from the things that you stand for. That's why human judgment has to be continuously part of the process. And AI and tools don't do that. And I'm a technology guy, right? I'm going to be the guy that says we need to build systems and build tools. And I do that, but it's always with humans first, right? It's human brilliance augmented with AI.
Yeah, I think JB makes a great point. I think AI is really an exciting and kind of frightening new realm for a lot of companies, especially, well, really every size of company. And more companies are starting to realize the need for governance in their use of AI, right? They have their policies, but they don't necessarily have their guardrails up. And that's, and in many cases, because they don't know where those guardrails should be. So I think working with the right partners to help find where those should be for your business, because it is a tailored solution. It's not a one size fits all baseball cap. I think that's a really critical thing as you start to use AI as a force multiplier. It's a really good point, JB.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. We should probably talk from a governance perspective, because we need to really advise leaders, especially when we talk about sales and how the implementation of that works. The danger of allowing it to run unfettered is really big for any company, right? It doesn't take very long for, again, that little drift to happen. And that's on the sales side. And now if you have marketing people who are drifting in a different direction, and if you have your support team that's drifting in a slightly different direction, all of a sudden the focus that's absolutely required for success has failed you, right?
Yeah, it can change the company's whole DNA.
Absolutely. I mean, the one thing that I will always remember is when Steve Jobs came back to Apple, right? And the first thing they did, he said, okay, we're going to get rid of all these products, all these different lines. We're going to focus on 3 products and 3 products only. And that's what they did, right? I mean, I was fortunate, I was there to see that happen. And really what every entrepreneur should be considering right now is making sure that they identify what they stand for and make sure they have their values and goals, not just something that sits up on the wall, but something that's a living document that everybody believes in. They're pulling in the same direction. And when they pull in that same direction, now you can implement tools on top of that. Now you can define processes that everybody believes in because they're part of it all. And then you can use AI. And then it's powerful.
I love that. Yeah, I love that, JB, because, if you're to your point, sales is over here, everything else is over here. And if you're in different directions, you're going against the grain and your sales are going to be sluggish. When you have that living, breathing document that you mentioned, it makes such a difference to the overall business because everybody, again, like you said, JB, they're all marching in the same direction. And that really is where you gain traction and it looks like success. I remember working with a client recently, and the client was over here really being visionary and generating lots of sales, but her team was off doing things or not doing things that she delegated to them. So it ended up being like this huge divide around what got done. She was still generating sales, but she was losing leads. She was missing out on opportunities to, renew with clients. There was a lot missing because she was charging out to sales, but her team, they had been delegated stuff. They weren't doing it. And, I came in and sort of sorted through the who's doing what and why aren't things getting done. And let's look at some regular reporting and accountability. And based on that, we were able to get things on track. So she can be the visionary. She can still go out and get sales, right? She can focus on sales, but now she can be the visionary rather than the bottleneck to other things getting done that also drive sales.
Sounds like there's a lot of overlap. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah, I was going to say, I want to bring up one more point that Eric and JB hit on, and Wendy Y just did as well, is the governance piece. I get emails all day long about, hey, we can help you, implement some KPIs on dashboards in your company and, increase the operational efficiency and productivity. And I'm like, how did that intent signal get to you about, my company and what we do? Like, something's off there. So we have to be careful with utilizing AI, and really honing in on our process, our ICP, like JB said, but our process, because we know Deming always said, if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. And right now, it feels like there's just spray and pray all over the place when it comes to sales and lead generation right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent points. And it sounds like there's a lot of overlap too from like the first question of how you appropriately delegate to people, as well as with like the AI and technology tools. So it's interesting to see that intersection there. Going over to you, Eric, with your background in strategy and execution, where do founders most underestimate the operational discipline required to delegate sales adjacent work effectively?
It's a great question. I think one of the biggest areas is for companies that provide a sales service, right? If let's say you're a plumbing service, right? You can tell what hours of the day you are focused on your actual bread and butter, the service you provide, versus how much time you spend marketing yourself, right? If you're a small company, it's a founder, right? It gets a lot more complicated when you are a seller. And a lot of companies out there have a service that is basically building referrals or helping to augment other companies' presence in social media or broadening their sales funnels. And for those professionals, I find it's very hard for a lot of them to differentiate and distinguish time that they should themselves and their team be focused on doing the work and the time that they should be focused on building their own brand. Now, when you can delegate, when you have somebody who is, the right person in the right seat, and you have the full context that they need to have in order to manage that properly, then you can probably, you can very properly delineate those things and work on them in the most efficient way you can. But it's very hard, especially when a company is starting out, when a founder is just starting out, to know, where do I turn this switch off and turn this switch on? They're the same muscles that you're using, but you're using them in different ways, and you have to be using them at the right times in the right ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Especially when you're trying to handle multiple roles at the same time, right? Marketing is so different than operationally. We'll talk about in the trades, right? If you have a trades business, the actual physical work requires a lot of discipline, energy, effort, knowledge, experience, right? And skill. That's different for marketing. You still need knowledge, experience, skill, and all of those things, but in a different way. And being able to understand what your strengths are and where your gaps are, or you're not as strong in those areas, is one of the biggest, I think, opportunities for founders and leaders really to help them build the team around them, right? What Wendy Y was talking about, put the right person on the bus and help them operationally build the business of their dreams, right? Because that's what, as a founder, as a CEO, as a leader, we have a direction that we want to go. And, I tried to do it many, many years ago, tried to do it on my own. It doesn't work. You need to have the right people around you and understand honestly about yourself, what your skills are, so that you can say, you know what, this is the time that I need to be out here learning more about my craft, my expertise, and I need to bring someone else on board who can help with that sales. Or conversely, if that CEO is really, really great at sales, like Wendy Y was talking about earlier, that's great, but let's bring the other people on so that they can operate consistent with the direction that the company wants to go, and using good human judgment, making decisions to take the whole organization one step at a time towards that goal.
Awesome. All right, let's move over to a question for you, Jennifer. You've seen how change initiatives fail when people aren't considered. What human or behavioral factors most commonly derail delegation efforts tied to sales execution?
Very good question. And I think we were already tapping on this a little bit, talking about human and behavioral factors. From the operational leadership development work that my firm does, we see a few things when it comes to sales focused delegation. So, first, I call the producer manager trap. And this is where leaders tend to believe real work is just activity based. As I alluded before, it's like every task, everything should be assigned to someone, versus creating a uniform identity and having an identity of what you want to stand for and what your company is standing for and the services that you provide. And these type of leaders tend to rise up through execution. They don't really understand from a leadership capability standpoint how it feels to delegate without abandoning their core identity, because all they know is do the work, do the work, do the work. But what is the meaning behind that work? So you have to be careful about, I guess it's more of the leadership versus the management track of that type of behavior when you're commanding a team or have direct reports. Another item we see is clarity masquerading as the clarity problem masquerading as a delegation problem. So JB was hinting on this quite a bit about not being clear on what you need to delegate or when to delegate. Not so much of the how, but what and when. And then who are you delegating certain activities to? And one clarity moment that we see quite a bit that is often is lacking is defining clear success criteria. So for a sales team, what does good look like? Is it, the number of leads generated a week? Is it quality leads generated a week? Is it conversion rates? Is it really getting into the category of business that we want? If we want to get in consumer products, what activities are we doing to make sure we are being present in the consumer products industry? A third one is a psychological safety gap. And what I mean by that is, your team has to trust you in order to perform very well, right? The more a team trusts their leader, the more engaged they are. And so you kind of have to play on the empathy, right? The emotional intelligence we keep hearing about as of late. You kind of have to play on that when you're a leader in order to drive a team. And I would say with those three things is what we've encountered where, you won't be as successful going through change or dealing with the human behaviors unless you're cognizant of those three areas. And there's many more, but I would say those are the top three.
Those are big ones. They really, really are. I also think, excuse me, I also think that in addition to the team trusting the leader has to trust the team. And that means, relinquishing. What did you say? The word you used, JB, is abdicate. I think that you can abdicate without, but you've got to trust the team to abdicate, right? And abdicate sounds negative. So you really want to instill and encourage autonomy and ownership so that people feel like they can actually accomplish the task or the activities that you've delegated to them.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Jennifer, what you said was really, it just rang true for me on a lot of different levels. When you think about, bringing people together into an organization and all pulling in the same direction, the level of trust has to be very high. And unfortunately, the heat of battle, which is, we're going to get to in public companies, it's the end of the quarter, right? Because you have quarterly earnings that you have to announce. And in small companies that are private, it's not necessarily the quarterly end, but it might be every month end. So that ends up being a true test of the direction of your company, of your decision making, and of the decision making of all of the members of your team, right? They may decide that, oh, you know what? I got to close this. I got to make this happen. I'm tasked with doing that. And maybe our goals, the goals that have been set out, and how we're being compensated, they tend to incentivize the person to do that one thing, which could be close more deals, but be inconsistent. That measurement may be inconsistent with the direction of the company, right? We want to close deals, but we want to close the right deals. So now we have a governance issue, right, Eric? And then you have a human problem, because, well, you told me that you wanted me to close this deal, and now you're telling me that I can't close the deal. I'm not saying you can't close the deal. I'm saying you have to close the right deal. Well, we didn't talk about that before. Now all of a sudden trust breaks down. And now you have challenges all over the place, simply because you really didn't understand that human component, the human factor of how we need to work together.
Some great points here. Wanted to have kind of a trade-off question for the panel here. Now, what's one uncomfortable delegation decision you've made or advised on that ultimately protected revenue growth, even though it may have felt a little risky at the time?
I have one. I was in charge of negotiating all the contracts for we had just gone public. And we had that one scenario that I was just referring to, where in order for us to make our numbers, in order for us to make the announcement that we were making our numbers, which means our stock price would go up, we had to have a couple of contracts come in. There were a couple $1 million contracts, but they had to come in by midnight at the close of business on the end of March. They didn't come in. I was told they would come in, but they didn't come in. And so I was asked very specifically, well, it's okay. It came in the next day. We can just predate it and everything is going to be fine. And I thought to myself, you know what? I have a choice here. And the choice is, I'm tasked with doing things a specific way. And I know that if I don't do this, if I don't accept this, then guess what? Our numbers are going to be down. But the positive side of that was, if we do, in fact, say, no, we don't, and announce it to everybody, the likelihood of us getting trust in the marketplace is even higher. So our stock price is going to go up. Well, it turned out that, that's exactly what happened. I was scared to death, right? I was in my early 30s when all this stuff happened. And if the company goes down, if the stock price goes down, everybody's gonna be mad at me. I could lose my job, all of that stuff that goes on. But at the end of the day, what your core values are in those times of great stress are going to be the things that enable you to be the best company that you could possibly be. And, that was one of those seminal moments in my career. And every founder, every salesperson has those moments. And look to yourself, look to the team, look at and understand what you're trying to accomplish. And when you're doing that with everybody around you, man, it's an awesome feeling.
That's a really good point, JB. I think, and probably a lot of us have had histories like this, but if you work in a place that has a negative or a toxic work environment, you can really notice how people treat the truth. And you'll notice people will tell the emperor all kinds of, colorful gilded clothing that he's wearing. But ultimately, you will have people who are defending themselves and their own interests, working just within the letter of the law of the company handbook, or paying lip service to what the company core values say that they are. Ultimately, the values of the company have to be instilled in every member of the decision-making teams at all levels of the organization. And it has to be actually borne out in reality, right? You can't say, oh, hey, we believe in honesty and being forthright and integrity, and then get mad at somebody for going up to the plate and doing what JB did and being honest and then punishing them for it in some way or other, right? You have to really walk the walk where that is concerned. And it's harder than it sounds, because especially as organizations scale, you get new people, you get new ideas, you get new backgrounds, you get new, frankly, emotional baggage, if I can call it that, bad habits from other organizations. But to kind of bring it back to the whole human in the loop analogy that JB was making earlier, ultimately you have to make a decision in your area, just as the people who you're delegating to have to make decisions in their area. And you want to make certain that they're actually using their own, let's say, moral compass as the defining factor of what do I do now? That's how you can really trust the people that you're delegating to.
And I think that's why change management is so important, but yet it's always swept under the rug, and people feel, or they don't really realize its true existence. Is for that reason that Eric just talked about. Someone has to be the white knight, right? They have to lead the charge, and the messaging has to always be clear and consistent, leveled with the integrity and values of the brand, of the company. And until someone steps up to do that and challenge the status quo or challenge the bad eggs that may come into an environment, you will always have those little seeps that get into a company and start making it negative. And that's not what we want, right? So there is some truth to someone being honest. And in JV's case, he was able to do that. And sometimes it allows people to see themselves in the mirror and realize what's really happening, and taking the time to acknowledge that with their team and turning it around. Those are the type of clients that we absolutely love to work with. The ones that are transparent, cohesive, and not afraid to challenge the status quo.
Yeah, I also think that it goes back to right person, right job. Part of identifying the right person to bring into your organization as a founder or CEO is making sure that you have shared values. Doesn't mean they have to look like you and sound like you. It means that when the rubber meets the road, they have the same level of integrity. They understand the importance of having integrity around issues, that speaking the truth, that being open, that understanding people and humanity and emotional intelligence and all of that really come into play in a big way. As part of the right person, you've got to make sure you're knowing that right person, and you're bringing in the right person with all of those factors, all of those values, so that as you grow, the whole team is growing based on those values, that set of values that really drive everything in the business.
Yeah, you know what, Wendy? Why it's really interesting. You use the word integrity, and it's a broad term, right? And what my experience is that many people would not define it the same way, and don't have a story that explains it even in a similar fashion. And so for us as leaders of our organization, it's incumbent on us to identify how we would not only define what our core values are, but explain them in such a way that everybody feels it, that they can incorporate it into their role. And in sales, it's even more important, right? Because in sales generally, it's a money focused reward system. And a money focused reward system doesn't necessarily translate into a values based reward system. So looking at it from that perspective, if we can identify what these principles are, it will go a long way towards making sure that you have the right people in your sales team, right? Which is what you're looking for, who will acknowledge that, oh, you know what, maybe I shouldn't do it with this particular prospect. And I'm going to choose not to do that. And report that up, through the sales team and have them rewarded for that. Because that's a great decision for the company. That's awesome. But we don't necessarily measure that. So it's one of the things that, is we try to build our AI platform for small businesses. That's one of the things that we put in there is a measurement of those types of decisions that are made that are not traditionally measured, right? Measure what matters. And if that's what matters in your organization, then you better put the implementation in there that enables you to do that.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone so much for coming up on time here. Want to have one final opportunity for those that have been listening and want to continue the conversation with you. Share, what's the best way for people to connect with you, whether it's on LinkedIn, website. We'll start with you, Wendy Y.
Well, first of all, I'm Wendy Y. Bailey on all platforms. Just remember the Y in the middle, and you'll find me everywhere. Instagram, LinkedIn is where I post most of my fractional content. I'm on Facebook. I also have a YouTube channel that I'm, sort of rebooting. And what's the other one? I'm not on Twitter or X. I am on Reels. I am on Reels, and I also post some video. The best way to get in touch with me is on LinkedIn or through my website at maximumops.com.
Awesome. Thank you, Wendy Y. Eric, how is the best way for people to connect with you?
Thanks very much. Yes, I am on LinkedIn. My last name is a little hard to spell, but it's Sambaluk. I also have my website at sambaluk-consulting.com. Love to have a conversation with anybody who wants to nerd out over strategy or initiatives or AI governance. Excited to talk with you.
Thank you, Eric. All right, Jennifer, how can people connect with you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn at Jennifer White, MBA. Also, our website, themjwgrp.com. And similar to Eric, I geek out on all things, all numbers, Excel spreadsheets, KPIs, supply chain, manufacturing. Glad to see everyone here.
Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. And JB, what's the best way for our audience to connect with you?
Yeah, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, JB Herrera. I also have a Substack that I write every week, specifically on values-driven AI ecosystems and how you can implement them safely, how you can use AI effectively, and more importantly, with the right team, as we talked about today. So synergyai.io, you can go there at my website, but LinkedIn is primarily where you can reach me.
Awesome. Thank you, JB. And thank you to all of our panelists for your clarity, honesty, and real-world insight that you shared today. And thank you to everyone who joined us live. Delegation isn't about doing less. It's about building the structure and leadership capacity that removes you as the bottleneck and keeps execution moving without constant rescue. That's why we've created the Executive Efficiency Blueprint to help you turn today's ideas into clear ownership, consistent follow-through, and better use of your leadership time. You can get the Executive Efficiency Blueprint at workergenix.com/EEB live. We'll drop the link in the show notes. And again, thank you all for joining us. We'll see you all on the next Executive Edge Live and on our podcast, Scale Smart, Grow Fast. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, Harley. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.